Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. We have a QNT Quant video here for you guys today. Do check out our other videos on the channel where we have a multitude of different topics and discussions, and we cover many different assets as well. And hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so either, and get notified of all the videos coming your way moving forward. So guys, straight into this one. Quant, in regards to the last week since the last video, there hasn't been sort of giant updates to presume here, but I wanted to touch on this one in particular. This is quite interesting. So Quant, of course, part of the Digital Pound Foundation Advisory Board, sorry. And look at this. What a nice party this must have been. Avalanche present, Ripple as well, Accenture, absolutely huge. There's a couple other mentions here as well in terms of financing and DLT application. So really interesting to see this accumulation of great people, great companies and technologies coming together for the unifying aspect of building or indeed advising at this stage the design of the digital pound. I'm not talking about the visual aspect of it. I'm talking about the actual integration piece of the digital pound for UK citizens here where I live. And this is kind of on the side panels of what's going on in the world in general for CBDCs, right? Central bank digital currencies. Now, there's a lot of things to be discussed still with digital money, mainly being around sort of course, the privacy aspect. How do we utilize this in cross-border payments? How do we reduce the fees? And of course, we've covered many times on this channel, probably one of the first channels to cover actually all the things like the Helvetia project, the Dunbar project, Jura. There's so many of them, and they all incorporate various different regions around the world. And as of November this year, the RTGS trialing system is in place for the end goal of November 2025 for the new RTS financial system being replaced. If you haven't seen my original video on this, I will leave it at the end of this one, and you should see it on the top of your screens right now. But watch this one first before you go onto that, of course. But very interesting to see these continuous moves for Quant in relation to the financial industry and the financial world evolving, utilizing DLT blockchain technology. And actually, if we look forward to aspects of this in further detail, we know Quant is a big advisor and part of the board on the Hyperledger Foundation, particularly with as well Hyperledger Fabric. This blockchain in particular is quite interesting. I do need to look into it a bit more, but from my understanding, it is separate to Ethereum, and it is in theory arguably powering things potentially like the IBM's blockchain, utilized by Accenture and many other projects and technologies as well. So, you know, there's a big incorporation here, a multitude of projects and companies coming together to build these systems that will eventually hopefully enhance humanity in some ways. But of course, there are some concerns as to where CBDCs and things will go, especially that we've got basic universal income on the horizons as well. So we see here, of course, we covered this in the last video. Gilbert was going through the aspect of CBDCs in general, and he made some really interesting points within this big, massive article. It's definitely worth reading on globalriskregulator.com. Lots of things we've already covered, like months, even if not maybe a year ago, with what the BIS are doing, the Bank of England, etc., towards the aspect of digital pounds and regulations and things, how CBDCs can enhance what we do as an economy and as people. But yeah, of course, there's many things in the background that we need to identify and understand a lot more and build knowledge towards the general public as we get nearer those times of launches. And he makes an interesting point here, particularly about ISO 20022. Now, we've spoken about this so many times, guys. Like, this ISO compliance and standardization is extremely important. This is part of the regulation and standardization of the messaging service and finance in general. And it's not officiated as such that Quant is an ISO token, but there is certainly a lot of conversations around this project. And even when you've got articles here from Gilbert, for example, of Quant, a founder, discussing these aspects, I'm pretty sure in the background they're probably associated, if not integrated, with these standards already. So working collaboratively using standards like ISO TC 307 and ISO 20022 will prove vital, as will developing effective regulatory frameworks. So this is very interesting. Crucially, the public and private sectors will need to come together to formulate. Now, we know these guys work with R3 Corda, and in relation to that, of course, things like XinFin and XDC, who are very heavy in the public and private DLT scenarios. But for sure, this is going to be very interesting to see the further development as we go moving forward into these years to come. And as I said, the building plans are in place. All the banks have information now on ISO20022 compliance. And if you go onto your bank, especially in the business sections, or even just search the bank that you use and alongside ISO, you will see they're already in play, guys. And most of them, like the webinar we showed with HSBC and NatWest, is that this is looking like November 2025 is the era where we see the full integration and switchover. So where we are right now is, of course, the piloting stage, or the final piloting stages, and then the integration pieces over the next year and a half. That time might move from November 2025. It's already kind of moved slightly since January this year, and I think it was around June or July time they did switch things about, but it's definitely a lot more concrete than it was before. So it's really interesting to see this. He did mention as well the emphasis of like why digital currencies are so interesting, and he mentions here, as of January 2022, 261 million people have used e-CYN. Now, that's January. If we look at these articles here, this is quite phenomenal. This one's posted September 22nd this year. 1.2 billion users. 1.2 billion users. This is quite amazing, really, as the approach of what it can achieve. So we're going from this big step of 261 million to potentially over 1 billion users, which is actually quite amazing, really. How long that will take or whether it's happened now, there's no information at this current stage, but the trials are already in place in these kind of countries, and we know Russia's doing similar as well. And of course, we know there's always conflict and things going on around the world, and it usually interlaces with money. And of course, the world, especially through the World Economic Forum and other institutions, they want to have a unified currency around the world, or a unified system and infrastructure, same as they want a world government, one world government. And this is where the world has always been transitioning to, since pretty much the World Economic Forum was probably built around like the 1970s, maybe even earlier. And we've seen that slow progression. We saw the early stages of gold, for example, the reserves aspect, and then we've seen the transition into security, AI, deep learning. We've seen the move now into digital currencies. You can see the path. So it's really interesting, and that's why I'm invested in a lot of these kind of projects, because they are very heavily involved in the institutional level and certainly the infrastructure level of a new financial banking system. We're talking about trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars worth, guys. This is where the market is, and that's why I've got heavy investments in these particular sector of tokens and assets and into these projects and technologies. So guys, that's quite interesting to me. Hopefully you found it interesting. Leave some comments below what you think about Quant and this whole pathway that we're going down into digital currencies. What's your concerns? And don't forget, guys, we do have an interview coming up in the next couple of weeks with the Digital Pound Foundation. This is huge. I don't think any other channel has been doing this, but I have good networking and contacts in all these areas of working blockchain and Web3 space. And it's going to be an absolute privilege to have these guys on board. They're going to be talking about the digital pound in general, what's their thoughts and feelings about it, what's the pros and cons, and maybe any barriers or concerns that people might have around this. And this is what the body has been created for, utilizing things like the Innovation Hub here in London to identify, like, what are people thinking and what are we doing as an infrastructure around the world, what is everyone else doing, and then concluding this over the next few years. So it's going to be really interesting. If you have any questions for them, jump on our community section on YouTube and find that post. It was about a week ago, and chuck in your questions on there, because I'll get through them as quickly and as many as possible with those guys. I'm really looking forward to that one. Let's jump into the chart of Quant, guys. It hasn't really moved significantly since the last video we did. We've had some interesting moves in the sense of we've come down with, of course, the FTX nonsense that's been occurring over the last week or so, and we hit the bottom areas around $96, $97. Now, if you remember in the last previous videos, I had a buy order at 102, I think. That hit, which is brilliant. Unfortunately, I didn't have one slightly lower than 100, but I'm not too massively fussed about that with the $4 or $5 difference. So I did accumulate a bit more Quant. I still have my buy order back here at $87. People still call me mad for that, but I thought, I generally thought, and I was rubbing my hands when a couple of days ago when we hit back down, I think the low here, $94, I was thinking, oh, here comes the 87, but it didn't quite come in. We'll have to see in the longevity of this, as many of the other assets out there. Of course, we're in a macro world, crazy environment right now. In terms of all these exchange issues and situations, people are a bit on edge. They're selling or panicking or moving money elsewhere, putting onto ledgers, etc. There's lots of things that we're going to see in a bouncing and wave mentality of a lot of the assets. But for me, Quant, one of the huge ones, yes, has higher value, but the value, in my opinion, of Quant is going to be very, very significant over the next few years and the next 5-10 years to come as well. So this, you see a lot of circles here. As we've gone with our pathway with Quant, I've always mentioned about specific areas of interest in terms of resistance and support, but I've also put circle areas of buy areas that have come in. Now, if you look here, one of the old ones that I put in, I did have areas of interest to come in at that 102 before as well as recently. So they're coming in, and I'm playing it quite well personally here. Hopefully you guys have been accumulating Quant as and when you can. I think this is a top project and an asset to hold. You see the big sell-off that's happened. I mean, this is quite normal really after the good intake that we had, certainly between September and October. We've had an outflux, particularly accelerated, as I said, in the last week or so because of the ongoings with exchanges, etc. But for me, I've got all my Quant now on Ledger. I transferred it across out the exchange last week and over the last few days with the newer accumulations that I had. And it's going to sit there. It's going to sit there for a few years. I'm going to try and accumulate Quant around these sort of 100 areas, especially if it comes back down to some of these low areas that we saw back in June. Can you believe it? $44. I was very fortunate to have accumulated a lot of Quant in that area and seen some good profits in that aspect in general. I did sell a couple of Quant, and literally only one or two, at these top areas just to get back some of the initial investment, and I'm really pleased with that because we come all the way back down and I reinvested in it anyway and still have some available USDT or USDC, I can't remember which one it is now, available to get that hopeful $87 come in. We'll have to see. But right now you can see we're trying to penetrate this macro fib retracement level again of 120. It has thus far failed the last 2 days, and it certainly failed back here as well on the 10th of November. Even with the retaliation of the FTX situation, it couldn't quite break that barrier. It did it slightly, but it pulled itself back down. So this is my anticipation that we could potentially have another wave back down to that 102 or 105 area at some point in the next few days, potentially. But for me right now, I've got those buy orders in. I'm just keeping a close eye on this. And I will potentially put some manual orders in at this 102 area again, just in case, because I do think that's a very big sweet spot. It's a rounded number, of course, near the 100. I always place my positions never directly on a rounded number. I always do it slightly above, usually with about a 10% leeway sometimes. But in this particular instance, I was more interested in that very, very lower region of $100. And it's similarly on the other side as well. However, with this instance, I didn't have one just below 100 because I already had the 102. There's not really a big difference in there. But in my anticipation in my head, I was thinking, well, if it's going to be coming down, there's going to be a bounce around that 100. But yeah, for sure it came in lower, but I do have that lower, as I said, 87. So we look at this data at the bottom here. You can see a bit of a spike here on the blue MACD line here. So we're trying to narrow this, which is going to be quite interesting. This is where I think we could get a bit of stabilization over the next few days, but potentially dropping down still potentially to that 105, as I said earlier. The RSIs are looking very healthy, 14-day 38, 28-day 43. Someone asked why I don't talk about the 90-day too much. Well, I do look at that one, but I'm more interested in the very close plays right now. The 90-day is more applicable when I'm thinking in perhaps more of a transitional market where we're going from a bear to nearly a bull market, because I'm looking at then the transition of the next 3 months. In my anticipation, whether this is right or wrong, I don't believe the market's going to swing around that much in the next 3 months. I do think we're still going to have a potential big drop still, another big one to come, bigger maybe than the FTX one. Who knows? We have to just play this correctly in the format of DCAing and just being sensible with your acquisitions. So that's why I don't particularly mention the 90-day one, but the 14-day, 28-day are very unique here. It's not as low as it was a few days back, of course, at 25, 38 respectively here on the 9th of November, but certainly right now, if you are new to quant, you could have potentially looking at this as a really good entry point, but you must always identify that this is a topsy-turvy market right now, and there should be lower positions to try and accumulate at as well. So you just got to play it by ear. Again, it's not financial advice, it's just opinion, but if I was into quant originally and I've done all my research and I understood quant and I was looking at these charts and these information, I'd be like, okay, there's an initial position opportunity here right now, but there is obviously risk that this could come down lower. So just be cautious, be reflective on this before you make any crazy decisions. I know it's easy to potentially FOMO into these kind of things because they do have big value fluctuations. I can understand if you're buying at 100 and all of a sudden it goes up to 150 or 130, you're going, oh wow, this is amazing. And then that's when emotion kicks in and you do mistakes. Just understand where we come from, where we are, and the positions from history as well, particularly. I mean, look at this. We're matching basically this huge gap that we saw in February 2022 this year. So that's why we've got a bit of a black hole here. And we really need to identify, in my opinion, still some lower regions. That's just my opinion. The performance indicators on the round side is showing some good moves actually for quant. 6% up on the week and 6% up on the 3 months. Down on the month, understandably, because of the situation that has occurred. But look at that 6 month position, 73%. And there's still big rooms for improvement over that year status as well. I think more and more people are becoming aware of ISO compliant aspects, what's the financial situation around the world and what's going to be coming with digital currencies, etc. And we know that quant is going to be at the forefront of that, or one of the main ones for sure, alongside Ripple, Accenture, potentially Algorand. We've seen Electroneum involved with Digital Pound Foundation advisory boards as well. So there's a whole stack of them that we need to be aware of. Guys, I'm going to wrap that up there. Thank you so much for watching this quant video. Hope you found it interesting and informative. Don't forget, as I said, to subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. And we will see you indeed on the next quant update video. And if there's anything that happens in between now and the next one, we will for sure jump on to get you guys the information that you crave. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.